The MCU is probably gonna die in the next few releases unless our pal Kevin starts putting quality over quantity and plot over politics again. That goes for Star Wars too, by the way, which has been bombarding us with real-world politics in the guise of fictional politics for too many releases now. But I'm starting to get over it, honestly. The MCU might have to be a sweet nostalgic memory, and Star Wars will never be more than a few movies and the Clone Wars, which was a great show. So what is the future of the MCU? Death, probably. But when a king dies, an heir must take his place. Who will now wear the crown of the top sci-fi fantasy franchise that the MCU has borne for a decade and a half? Kalki 2898 AD is the first installment of Bollywood's Kalki Cinematic Universe, the KCU, and it was a pretty epic first movie. It's Mad Max meets Star Wars meets Hindu mythology meets kind of Dune meets the Bible. It doesn't make sense, but it makes sense. This is actually a difficult movie to summarize because a lot happens, but basically, fertile girls are captured by this organization called the Complex, which is led by this dude named Supreme Yaskin in order to extract a serum from their wombs, but no pregnancy lasts beyond 120 days. However, one woman, the tritagonist, Sum 80, is at 150 days, which is special. Elsewhere, the bounty hunter protagonist, Bhairava, is trying to collect enough units to enter the complex, which is a heaven compared to the desolate wasteland that is Earth. And elsewhere, again, the immortal deuteragonist, Ashwatthama, is biding his time until Kalki, the next reincarnation of Vishnu, is born so he can protect him and see him bring light and life back to the world. That's the Spark Notes. Now, I've claimed that Kalki could be the next successor of Marvel and Star Wars, so I should probably give a few reasons. First, I want to talk about Dune. I think some people could see Dune as the next Star Wars. It's politics-heavy, fantasy-laced sci-fi with a chosen one main character. Or sci-fi-laced fantasy, but I'm not going to get into that right now. Dune literally inspired Star Wars, but Dune feels like something else entirely. It's a blockbuster, but it doesn't feel like the punchy, funny, action-adventure movies that Star Wars and the MCU have been pumping out. It's not really a laid-back sort of watch. It's a dramatic epic with heavy themes. I don't see the new Dune franchise as a success. Oh my word. Successor as a successor to the MCU or Star Wars because they aren't the same kind of movie. Kalki 2898 is that kind of movie. It is punchy, funny, action-adventure with some truly epic scenes sprinkled in. It's a sci-fi epic but presented closer to an MCU movie than a Dune movie. It's more digestible and easier to watch, at least in my opinion. There are fairly strong themes even though they might not dive into them as deeply as Dune would, so that's why Kalki is the successor and Dune isn't. They're not the same kind of movie. Kalki 2898 AD is a familiar movie. Bhairava is the likable, roguish, and charming protagonist in the vein of Han Solo and Indiana Jones and other Harrison Ford characters, I guess. He's sprinkled with some morally gray sprinkles. Sum 80 is extremely recognizable as a Mother Mary figure, though she is based on an actual character in Hindu mythology who conceives without a father, so she's not, like, actually a Mother Mary archetype. There's a clever, sarcastic AI sidekick named Bougie, who's like a female Jarvis with an attitude. The setting itself is familiar, a wasteland dystopian where all the resources are controlled by a totalitarian government, or in this case, an old guy. Floating old guy. See, it's different. Even being a mythology retelling isn't novel. To non-Indian audiences, Hindu mythology isn't something we see every day, but we are no stranger to mythological retellings. Kalki might not reinvent the wheel, but it adds plastic bottles to the spokes and paints flames on the rubber, meaning it adds some flair. It's familiar but fresh. Take the music. I'm well aware that I'm Canadian, so I don't exactly hear Indian music every day, so a movie filled with it would be novel to me. But my point is not so much the type of music, but just that it's different, period. Most movie soundtracks in Western entertainment sound the same. Cinematic music has become a genre all its own, so there's going to be a lot of similarities. I think people should take more risks with music. I mean, it's one of the driving factors of emotion, so if it all sounds the same, eventually the audience will cease to be moved. Another thing that is quite familiar but refreshing is the setting. To Western audiences, mythological adaptations are nothing new, but mythology adaptations set in a futuristic dystopia is certainly not something we see every day. Usually, it's set in the same time the mythology was written or in present day, and the settings often influence the dynamic of gods and people. If it's when the mythology was written, more than likely the human characters are going to worship the god characters, and if it's present day, the human characters probably won't bow down to the gods, and it will likely be a story of the gods coming down to humanity's level. Gods and men in a futuristic setting, that could be anything from Armageddon to deposing the gods. It's a dynamic we haven't seen much of. A smaller thing I find interesting about the setting is the fact that it's a manufactured wasteland, meaning that the tyrant Supreme Yaskin drained the earth of the last of its resources. I think it's a cool take on a dystopian future that it wasn't actually humanity that wiped out nature, but that a godlike being took it away from them. Kalki's setting is trying something a bit different, jazzing up an old sci-fi trope and an old fantasy genre. Now, I can enjoy an action scene, but either it has to be shockingly violent, like The Boys, or has really good character moments built within it. Those are like the only things that will keep me like really interested. If it's not one of those two things, I'm probably a bit zoned out. Like, I can appreciate epic action scenes, but I'm often waiting for them to be over. So what makes Kalki action scenes different? They are noticeably long. A lot of Western action scenes don't last long. It goes from exposition to exposition in like 10 minutes. In Kalki, the action scenes go on far longer than you would expect. Like, there were multiple times when I thought the fight would be over, but then the characters find ways to keep fighting. Like, the characters don't give up until they literally cannot do anything else. I could feel the push and pull, the give and take, the weight each action had. Each action led into another, so the scene couldn't give up until one of the characters had no other action left. A lot of action scenes are quick and to the point. Characters are immobilized or defeated quickly in order to get to the next scene. Like, the audience gets the point, right? In Kalki, the scenes feel much more real and exhausting because the point isn't necessarily the victor, rather what each character can do in the moment to get to the next one. And each character feels like they have a chance of victory. Also, chaining a dude to 2 pillars and watching him bring the pillars down like stalks of corn was quite epic to watch. I think a lot of people think that as soon as something kind of campy is included in a movie, then that's all they can see, turning the movie into camp or just simply ruining it. Kalki has a mythological battle at the beginning where a main character looks AI because he's been aged down. I mention this because he was the only one aged down, and it was very obvious, so it feels kind of campy to have this CGI face conversing with a real face. There's an animated music video showing the downfall of humanity that makes me feel like I should be praying more. Krishna is a JoJo character for some reason. The main protagonist dips a love interest and she thinks that's the greatest thing ever, and the movie plays the scene up like a K-drama and the holding hands scene. Kalki is more flamboyant, weirder, and sometimes quite different from action-adventure movies of Western entertainment. Personally, I think that's a good thing. Okay, so we all know when the MCU started to become too funny for its own good. Instead of having a good balance of humor and drama, or even a few movies where humor wasn't a focus at all, the MCU decided to make comedy action movies with a bit of drama peppered in, though never at the expense of a joke, and always at the expense of the drama. I'm just glad no one cracked a joke after Peter got dusted or Tony sacrificed himself, but I guess even the MCU has a bit of tact. A bit. A tiny wee bit. A microscopic bit. Kalki didn't have that issue. I never once felt like it crossed over into Marvel territory where the jokes obliterated the drama, nor did I think Kalki took itself too seriously to be humorless. You know that moment where there's epic music and the character is doing something cool and the whole scene is just epic, and then the character falls down or gets hit with something and the music cuts out and it's supposed to be funny? Kalki did that well. But they also had epic moments where the music didn't cut out and the character didn't fall down or get hit with something. Epicness was allowed to ensue uninterrupted. So if you're looking for MCU style humor but appropriate for the scene, then Kalki 2898 is your movie. Unlike another cinematic universe, which shall remain nameless, the Kalki cinematic universe isn't going to keep on going until it dies, because the story it's trying to tell has already ended. It's an adaptation of the story of Kalki, the final avatar of the Hindu god Vishnu. Kalki is the one who comes at the end of the final stage of humanity, known as Kali Yuga, when the world is at its darkest and will begin a new cycle of ages. There are 4 ages or yugas in a cycle. In other words, the KCU has an end goal from movie 1. So unless they're planning on expanding this world with other stories and myths, there is likely to be a finite amount of movies, and as we all know, nothing gold can stay. It's a good thing, endings. It makes us appreciate the beginning and middle. So while large sci-fi fantasy franchises are dying because they either can't get off their feet or don't know when to sit down, I have hope for Kalki's longevity infinity. Apparently that's a word. I'm gonna speed run another 4 things because I like the idea of matching the number of comparisons to the number of avatars Vishnu has. I don't know. Bhairava is the main protagonist, but he's not treated like he's the hero. He was allowed to be morally gray, and he literally kidnapped someone at the end of the movie. He's not a bad guy, but he's not a good guy. I feel like Marvel and Star Wars and a lot of action-adventure, sci-fi fantasy movies that have a morally gray protagonist need to show the audience that they're a good person at heart. Bhairava is pretty neutral in my opinion. But basically, the movie allows him to be purely morally gray. Like, he's not a bad guy, he's not a good guy, he's just a guy. Soom 80 was the weakest of the 3 main characters. However, she operated less as a character and more as a plot device, the object of everyone's quests. I saw glimmers of good character work, but I think we'll get that in the next movie. However, I just really liked that she wasn't like all the other female characters in sci-fi fantasy movies. She wasn't kick-ass beyond believability, nor was she a wise sage Galadriel figure, which are basically the only 2 tropes a female can be in fantasy lately. Putting aside the underdevelopment of her character, she was just pretty normal, which I appreciated. Villains can be evil. It's okay. It's not gonna ruin your story if your bad guy is just a bad guy. People like bad guys. It's fun to watch them burn things to the ground sometimes. We all need that therapy. Not every bad guy needs to have a tragic backstory. Nothing wrong with giving them one, but nothing wrong with not giving them one. Something that Marvel and Star Wars and every sci-fi fantasy story struggles to do lately. The 2 main bad guys in the movie don't have tragic backstories, at least not ones that we know of. The movie isn't trying to make you sympathize with them. I am, however, very interested to see what the main villain does and what his evil plan is. Kind of similar to my thoughts on Isaac from Castlevania, which is a video if you want to watch that. If Lord of the Rings immersion is up here, animation is here, Dune is here, then Kalki is here, along with the MCU. The costumes, set design, the level of CGI all works together to create an immersive experience that won't make you forget the setting isn't real, but will allow you to enter that world. The CGI is good enough that there's only a few moments where I seriously notice it, and there's enough practical effects that the characters feel like they're interacting with the world. Kalki 2898 AD is a slightly campy and altogether epic adventure that will ignite the spark in you that Marvel killed years ago. Kalki takes everything we loved about Marvel and does it well, without committing any of the MCU's recent sins. While Dune might be the spiritual successor of Lord of the Rings in terms of theme and scope and epicness, I think Kalki is the successor of the MCU at its peak. There is action, there is emotion, there is epicness, and there is a lot of heart and soul. It is a popcorn film that leaves you with a lasting impression and will give you something to talk about with the friends you watched it with. It's rewatchable and memorable. It's everything I loved about the MCU and everything I wish it still was. But every kingdom must fall, and a new one must rise in its place. The MCU is in its dusk. It's time for the dawn of the KCU. Or maybe it's just one really good movie and I'm severely jumping the gun.